And then what? In the next few days, there will be simultaneous, diverse, yet parallel celebrations underway, both in the United States and worldwide. Many of our neighbors will be observing Día de Muertos, the Day of the Dead, on October 31st. As was pointed out earlier, this is an Aztec custom. Its roots go back about 3,000 years, and is pervasive in Mexican and Latin American countries. As we saw in Esteban's reading and the visual presentation, families set up in their homes an ofrenda, an offering, with a shrine of photos of the dead, candles, food, and water, all in order to welcome the spirits of those who have gone. So long as they are remembered by the living in this way, their spirit lives on. What your photos and candles have created here is just such an ofrenda. Ours encompasses a much wider remembrance than any one biological family could muster. Most of us, however, are more familiar with the other practice that occurs on October 31st, All Hallows Eve, shortened to Halloween. These practices seem to have begun with the Celts in their harvest festival about 2,000 years ago. Pronounced Samhain, this was a division of the year between the lighter half, summer, and the darker half, winter. At Samhain, the division between this world and the other world was at its thinnest, allowing spirits to pass through. The family's ancestors were honored and invited home, while harmful spirits were avoided, warded off. People wore costumes and masks to disguise themselves so that the harmful spirits couldn't grab them. Bonfires and food played a large part in the festivities. Food was prepared for the living and the dead. Food for the ancestors who were in no position to eat it was distributed among those who were in need. While the Day of the Dead welcomes the spirits in joyful and extended fiesta, the Celtic observances add the dimension of fear and dread in the form of evil spirits roaming the earth with the power to do harm to the living, hence ghosts, goblins, and witches. Portions of both these practices were bequeathed to us by way of the Roman Church in about 800 in our Common Era, and now has morphed itself into a secular, trans-religious event called Trick or Treat. Let us not forget that the 9th film, called Halloween, is in your local theater now. 40 years since the first one was produced. Halloween has become a big deal. In 2017, last year, we in the United States established several all-time records for our Halloweening. Here they are. 179 million people participated. Our average spending per person amounted to $86.13. Our total spending came to, some of you have already done sums, I'm not sure, $9.1 billion. Now, I'm wondering, 179 million participants and not one person came to my door. I got all these Reese's Pieces things. What to do? I'll think about it. Halloween is by no means limited to America. Many countries do the same as we do and add their own wrinkles and improvements. October 31st is also, by eerie coincidence, Harry Houdini's birthday. Happy birthday, Harry. Ooh. But behind these observances, something universal is going on. These two practices come in touch with a question that continues to remain unanswered. And then what? After death, anything? And if so, what is it? There are several ways to approach the question. Religion is one venue, and religions have spent a lot of time on this question, except that the responses among the religions are so diverse. Hindu belief is based on rebirth and reincarnation. Depending on the karma of this life, good or bad, you are reborn. For Buddhism, death is the end of the body, but not the soul. Rebirth is in another realm. Nothing is permanent. Orthodox Christianity speaks of resurrection, the immortality of the soul, and heaven. The belief in bodily resurrection mitigated against any form of treatment of the body other than burial, because if it was to be resurrected in the last day, they needed to find it. A major branch of Christianity would have us divided after death into heaven, hell, and purgatory. Until 2007, there was also a category called limbo, where the souls of unbaptized children were assigned. The iconoclastic wit of the late George Carlin voiced the hope that the church, in canceling limbo, promoted everyone. In Islam, death is the separation of the body and the soul, with the soul continuing in the afterlife. What about us? Or what about you? The vision of life beyond death as expressed in the Unitarian Universalist Association. You may want to take notes about this. I quote, "Unitarian Universalist views about life after death are informed by both science and spiritual practices. Many of us live with the assumption that life does not continue after death, and many of us hold it as an open question, wondering if our minds will have any awareness when we are no longer living. Few of us believe in divine judgment after death. It is in our religious DNA. The Universalist side of our tradition broke with mainstream Christianity by rejecting the idea of eternal damnation." End quote. Among us, and we are youths, each of us is left to explore options that resonate with us. Among us here, I suppose, pretty much a full range of imagined options are held by us at various times. In addition to religious differences, there are wide variations in the way cultures choose to express their connections with those who have died. In Asia, the living take provisions to the gravesite and spend the day as a family event. From the Encyclopedia of Death and Dying, in case you don't have one at home, this analysis of Asian practices, quote, "In every human society, one can find manifestations of the human desire for some kind of continuance beyond death. Typically, a person is encouraged to live in a way that prepares one for personal salvation. whether by moral self-discipline, seeking God's grace, or other means. An emphasis on the same principle of reciprocity that governed relations among living members of a Chinese community apply. It was assumed that the dead could influence the quality of life for those still in this world, either for good or for ill. Thus, proper burial, careful observance of mourning practices, and ongoing offerings of food and gifts for ancestors assured their continual aid. End quote. There is no shortage of evidence that a concern about what, if anything, comes beyond the life we can know is pervasive worldwide. Long before any of our religions existed, the Egyptians built pyramids, replete with the comforts that their royals would require in the afterlife. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, was buried with 8,000 terracotta soldiers to fight for his defense in the afterlife. The memorials we continue to establish, such as the Holocaust Memorial. We experienced a moving exploration of that here 2 weeks ago. And the African American museums that remind us of the horrors of lynching and segregation. The World Trade Center Memorial. All stir us to both remember the events and the individuals who have died. The docents of those memorials thus embody the victims and live out their last minutes. On a personal level, I'm pretty skeptical about continued existence beyond personal memories. I'm just not a believer. However, for good or for ill, life, death, afterlife seem not to depend on my beliefs. There are experiences I've had that fly in the face of what I believe, but still I believe. None of them prove anything, and yet there they are, nagging at any certainty I might claim. My mother, seriously, dangerously ill in the hospital, told us of an experience of the night. She was moving toward a bright light, which somehow she knew, without fear, was death. But then being told, "Not yet, Margaret, it's not your time." She awoke and began the path of recovery. In the course of my life and ministry, grieving family members, spouses, children, tell me of encounters with their dead loved ones. They often describe a visual experience and a sense of conversation. One woman in particular I want to mention to you today. Her husband's name was Ken, and he had died, and she and I and her family had been through all of the practices about his death and burial. I went to visit her one day following his death. And as I walked into the room, she said, "Did you see Ken on your way in?" I said I had not seen him. Her response was, "You must have passed him. He just left." "I'll bet you weren't paying attention." Maybe she was right. She then described for me the encounter the two had had. She came away from it with a sense of real comfort and assurance. In the public arena, I hope you have all seen at least one episode of the Long Island Medium. Teresa Caputo, if you haven't, you're missing something. I'm serious. She channels the spirits of the dead for those who come to her from word from their loved ones. Occasionally, these interactions take place spontaneously in stores or in other public settings. Unfailingly, her counsel is that the spirit knows and embraces the survivor and encourages them to move on in their lives. I've seen the show many times, always with skepticism and a good measure of disbelief, tempered, however, at amazement at the personal details she reveals, both about the person who has died and the person to whom she's speaking. Perhaps I do harbor a wish for something more. Our family loves retelling of my father-in-law's response. He was in his late 90s, and his children put to him the question, "Dad, after you die, what would you like us to do with your body?" His answer, "Surprise me." If there is indeed a me that remains to be surprised, perhaps we all shall be. After all this, I do not know what there may be beyond life. Frankly, apart from preparation for the sermon, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I am, however, left with this of which I am sure. I am a candle, lit from a candle, lit from a candle. I am not self-created. I was caused to be. Those who have tended my flickering flame, family, friends, you, have nourished, bruised, and brought me, brought you, brought us to this day in the midst of life. Fred Buechner is right in the reading that Perry gave us a while ago. We are each a necropolis. Each of us are filled with those who have gone before. The next few days serve as a collective reminder of that. But that is far from all that we are. Called are we to honor all living beings. We are alive in this world at this time. I am called to be a self again, a single, true, and whole self. Called to be this rather than that. Called to be here rather than there. Called to be now rather than then. Called to be, of all things, me. As this morning, when the alarm went off, or the children came to wake you, or your dream woke you up, you are called to be, of all things, you. To wake up is to be given back your life again.